Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Ag Forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions, your premier platform for real-time global insights. But we'll begin first by looking at a satellite image last night of sunset here across the Western Hemisphere. And what we're looking at here is the day-night line running basically straight north to south, because today, September 23rd, is the fall equinox for the Northern Hemisphere. And remember, equinox means equal day and night. So basically, everywhere on Earth except for the North and South Pole, we got 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. Now, the sun is setting on the North Pole, won't rise there again for 6 months, and it is rising on the South Pole, where it will be up for 6 months. And even though astronomically Earth is getting this very unique day where the sun rises and sets, where the day-night line runs north-south, nothing is really equal about the weather systems going across the planet. And this is what I mean. Just take a look at the last couple of weeks here. 14-day percent of normal precipitation from parts of the Pacific Northwest racing through the north central plains over toward the Great Lakes states, much above average precipitation. Turn your attention to the maps over here on the right. In this particular quarter, that same quarter I just highlighted, we see some locations that are going off my color bar again, picking up a surplus of 5+ inches of rain over that time period. Outside of that area, much of the southern half of the United States and the East Coast have been very, very dry, specifically the southeast, where some locations have gone the last 2 weeks without a drop of rainfall. Of course, we can see the influence of Tropical Storm Imelda here, which we talked about that catastrophic flooding in Houston last week, and some locally heavy rainfall on some productive cotton fields in parts of Texas. But it has really been a split country in terms of the way that precipitation has been coming through here. Just look over the last 72 hours. The giant ridge that we talked about sitting over the southeast, which has been funneling moisture into that boundary and through here, or along that boundary, take a look at the rainfall totals from Texas through Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, up into Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin. In that area, widespread 1 to 3 inches with some locally very heavy amounts. And that was just the first part of this. As the storm track was coming into the Pacific Northwest, adding more rain there as well, it eventually got into parts of North Dakota. And over the weekend, in addition to some big hail reports, some locally heavy rainfall adding up greater than 6 inches of rain. Now, the bad news that I have in this weather forecast is, through the end of September, I'm not seeing much of a change overall in this flow pattern. It's not going away. In fact, at times it's going to become even more highly amplified. So this storm track hangs on. The lingering boundaries into this area are there, and the ridging over the southeast tending to keep things dry. We're not shaking this pattern anytime soon. Both the GFS ensemble and the European ensemble showing the same thing. And speaking of things being unequal, take a look at the temperature forecast through day 6 through 10. That's going to be a critical time period where we see this deep trough coming out west, building into a large ridge that's going to be sitting here over the southeast, keeping the heat on. So we're going to have to start having a discussion about the frost threat coming through the Canadian prairies into parts of Montana and North Dakota. And also remember, if you think you've seen this pattern before, this was exactly what we saw at the beginning of spring. And what that means is that trough here, best upper level support right in through this area for a very active storm track. So with that, let's dig into this, all right? All hazards weather map starting off today. Well, yes, we're still seeing a lot of river flooding here on our major river systems that are in parts of the Midwest. Dense fog advisory out through parts of Kansas, Missouri, and Iowa if you're up early this morning heading on into work. But I'm going to start this out by taking you over here to California, where we have gale warnings and advisories along the coast, and right in through here, a red flag warning. You can see in this animation high pressure sitting just off the coast, the stronger winds coming in this direction. But I want you to focus on the Central Valley with me right in through here. On the northern part of that, we call this the Sacramento Valley. For those of you that are not from California, the northern part of this, do you see how the winds are coming here off the Sierra Nevada and here off the higher elevation that's much closer to the coast, and then right in through the middle is where these winds meet. So as the air descends the mountains, it warms adiabatically and it dries, and as it converges in the center part of the valley there, it's extremely dry, and we're expecting wind gusts from 20 to 35 plus miles an hour today. So this is a high-risk day in terms of fire threat in that area. And I'll tell you something, California, your temperature swings coming up in the next few days are going to be pretty amazing. We'll talk about that in just a few seconds here. Now, what are we looking at in terms of precipitation over the next 5 days? Well, this is our national blended model, and what we notice here is that the ridge over the southeast tends to be hanging on. The lingering boundary problem we've had, that stationary front problem that's been stretching from Texas into the Midwest, hanging on. We've got multiple storm systems coming through parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota throughout this week and really the next 10 days. And they start in the Pacific Northwest, which is why the windward side of our mountains is still looking quite wet. And over Arizona, I'm expecting locally very, very heavy rainfall today. But watch what happens as I add on the subsequent 4 days to this. So this is the next 5 days. This is now days 0 through 9. And we really just don't shake with that high amplitude pattern, this heavy rainfall stuff through at least the first couple of days of October here. Now, I made a case in my long range video from last Wednesday that we may be able to shake this particular pattern once we get into the month of October, but leading up to the next 10 days here, very, very much the same pattern that we have been in. Locally, very heavy rainfall in parts of the Midwest here. Now, I can at least say this. I'm thankful that it's happening at the end of September this year and not mid to late October, just given how late the planting was for harvest, but this is less than ideal, of course, in this area. What are we watching in the day in terms of severe weather today? Well, the system that was plaguing the midsection of the country over the weekend has now moved to the northeast. So our severe weather threat is greatest here in parts of New York, Pennsylvania, Vermont, but then you're going to see the lingering frontal boundary stretching right in through this area. And as it does so today, we might get some storms through the mid-south back over into the south-central U.S. On a completely separate note, we do need to be watching parts of Arizona. Remember last week we talked about some tropical moisture coming up here with two tropical systems getting through the Baja and potentially supplying some storms over parts of Arizona with some locally very heavy rainfall. Now, this rainfall will be welcomed at the end of a monsoonal season, which definitely underperformed. And I'm not so much worried about the risk of the strong to severe storms as I am the locally heavy rainfall in that area. So if you're watching in Arizona, today could be very, very wet. In the day on Tuesday, a low pressure system is actually going to start in the Pacific Northwest, gain some strength over the mountains, and start to move here toward right along the U.S.-Canada border. And we will be seeing its frontal boundary stretch into this area, which is why we're keeping a close eye on parts of the Midwest here as we get into the day on Tuesday. And that system moves to the east by the time we get into Wednesday, but leaves that front right in through there. And that's why on Wednesday we have the marginal risk of storms in parts of Missouri, Arkansas, Kansas, and Oklahoma. All right, so that is at least your next 3 days as identified by the Storm Prediction Center as to where to expect some severe weather. Let's animate it out with one of our high-resolution models here. This is the 3-kilometer NAM. Takes us out to about 7 a.m. on Wednesday. If I bring this back, let's just see the early morning rainfall from system number 1 moving through parts of the UP and in parts of Michigan, the lower part of Michigan here. But you can see the main boundary, the main frontal boundary stretching through parts of the Ohio River Valley, getting back into Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. So right in through here, as we press throughout the day, that boundary is our source of showers and thunderstorms. See it right in through there? Now this boundary then begins to tilt back up toward the high plains as system number 2 comes out of the Pacific Northwest. So late in the day on Monday, let's get right here to 5 or 6 o'clock. Why these scattered showers and storms in through this area? See it? Big heavy rainfall events in parts of Arizona and New Mexico. And the next system to watch is moving into parts of Washington State and then getting over the mountains in the overnight hours on Monday night, here it is, into Tuesday morning. So that next system starts to take shape here in the north central plains early Tuesday morning, while the remnants of the heavy rainfall in Arizona move to New Mexico, and our main front still sitting right here. But we're about to pull this one back north, and you see that throughout the day on Tuesday, we have heavy rain that moves through parts of North Dakota. And no, I wish I didn't have to say the words heavy rain and North Dakota together, given how much rainfall we saw over the weekend. But it presses through midday Tuesday. And we're going to watch on the heating of the day. See, our frontal boundary is now here. Right there. We're going to be watching here in the afternoon to evening hours right through this corridor for more strong to severe thunderstorms to blow up right into that area. This, again, Tuesday afternoon and evening. Now, to see where this all goes by the time we get into midweek, let's switch over to the GFS model and play this out through midweek. So if we just get to Tuesday, that's where we've already seen. Here it is. This is now early in the morning on Wednesday. That system there, main frontal boundaries right in through this area. Now watch what we see. Wednesday into early Thursday morning, that system exits, and you see here that it leaves its frontal boundary sitting right in through this area. Now, as we move toward the end of this week, this is where things get quite interesting in the Pacific Northwest. The next system gets shoved out here by the time we get to Thursday night, again, bringing heavy rainfall into parts of potentially the Dakotas, but really into Minnesota and northern Wisconsin, a place we don't want it. Frontal boundary sits right to the south and through here, so some heavy rain out ahead of that as well. But this is early morning Friday midday right about here, and then we're going to get into Friday evening. And this is what I don't like to see. System number 1 gets wrapped up into into this trough feature that's sitting over the Hudson Bay. Frontal boundary sits right here, and this high pressure cell you see out there doesn't go away for a while. And it is the pump of moisture that keeps feeding onto this boundary, giving us locally heavy rainfall. And while this system toward the end of the week can do quite a bit in terms of producing heavy rainfall, the details on the next system coming through, well, we're going to have to see how they play out this week, but watch this. That system on Saturday really starts to take shape in the mountains. Now, we're still watching two things. There's still a frontal boundary here, and the next system cranking up here for the state of Wyoming right now, late in the day on Sunday. Snowfall elevations may be down to 5,000 feet with this, as some really cold air tucks into that trough. And then what do we see? This is now getting into Sunday evening, Monday morning, Monday afternoon, getting into Tuesday. And what do we notice? High here, pulling in the moisture, storm track from the Pacific Northwest to the Great Lakes. That is what we've seen now for several weeks, and it seems to just not want to break down as we finish out the month of September and get into October. And even beyond that, if I just keep playing, you just see that same track really setting up here as we get into the middle of the week next week. That's why that 9-day forecast showed so much rainfall through parts of the Midwest and the Northern Plains. So we just can't seem to shake that particular pattern. And why can't we do that? Well, over the last couple of weeks, we've seen the Madden-Julian Oscillation get out of its null phase, come out into phases 8, and now it's lingering in phase 1. Now, what does that mean for us? Well, the Madden-Julian Oscillation, we're tracking tropical motion here, but it has an influence on the jet stream. And that influence looks something like this. Toward the end of the week, into the weekend, look at the trough that gets established across the western United States. So California, you're on a roller coaster ride of temperatures. Hot to start the week. You're going to be cooling off the rest of the week, getting into the weekend. And this particular pattern with the trough sitting here and a ridge in this corridor, boy, we just get the flow going like this, and it's going to make very active weather here. Now, we don't necessarily see this pattern breaking down as we get into the early month of October here. But overall, I can't necessarily tell you that the flow is blocked up. It's just kind of regenerative, if you will. We just keep seeing that particular picture kind of play its way out as we get into the first week of October. Now, what does it mean in terms of temperatures? Well, we certainly keep much of the United States over the coming 3 to 4 days on the warmer side of things. Where our storm track sits, which is where I drew that line, is about the only places where we see some cooler than average weather. And also the moisture coming up here, keeping parts of Arizona cool. But California, look at the changeover you've got days 0 through 5 compared to days 6 through 10. That's when our highly amplified pattern is going. And if you think you've seen this before, remember exactly what we saw this spring. Big ridge over the southeast, active storm track in the middle part of the country, and we're going to have to start talking about frost in this area with the cooler temperatures that are sneaking down, because we see that all the way through days 11 through 15. And again, this is getting us into that first week of October. Still much of the same in terms of that overall setup and our temperature distribution. So let's take a look at our high resolution view here of our temperature forecast from the National Blended Model. And we notice here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of this week, there's not a whole lot to be talking about. It's not until the deeper trough begins to become established. Now you watch the western side of the United States. This is Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now the trough is well established. Parts of Montana getting into North Dakota. I know it's going to be a little late compared to average on our first frost, but here it comes in for the end of this week and weekend. Now, meanwhile, folks that are sitting here under the ridge are not going to be talking at all about cooler weather. We have overnight lows in the 70s. And remember, this is the beginning of October, overnight lows in the 70s, while the western United States gets plunged into some very, very cold air. Like I said, snowfall levels creeping down to 5,000 feet, maybe below that, with some of the cold air that is in place with this deeper trough that's out there. Now, in terms of our frost threat, you're going to see here once we get past the 27th and 28th, that is when the pattern gets established and we start to see much higher frost probabilities showing up in the Canadian prairies here, Montana and North Dakota at that point. Still, getting a big frost that comes into the Corn Belt, not seeing it at this point with our longer range forecasts. So to finish up, I want to talk about the tropics, then we'll do a little bit about South America, and we'll wrap this one up. Jerry, not too concerned about, staying out here in open ocean. Tropical Depression 13, right now projections are to do this over at least the next 5 to 10 days. So that's way out in our discussion, but we got to talk about Karen. So Karen formed over the weekend, and my concern about Karen is, while over the next 5 days, the National Hurricane Center basically pulls Karen's track straight north over Puerto Rico, where we certainly have these tropical storm warnings out right now for Puerto Rico. The big concern is that if Karen gets pulled underneath the bigger ridge that's sitting in this area, we could take the track of Karen and put it here in the Gulf of Mexico. My concern about that is you can see some of the ensemble members wanting to do that if they're right, and both the 0Z GFS and 0Z ECMWF wanted to do this. Now again, it's 10 days away, but if it wanted to happen, that would be substantial for the Gulf of Mexico, given how warm the water is there and the potential, like we saw out of Imelda, with bringing extremely heavy rainfall. So can we just keep an eye on this together this week and see where the track goes? To finish up, let's talk South America. In my long-range update coming out on this Wednesday, I will be discussing quite a bit of what I think about what's going on in South America. Certainly the year-on-year Vegetation Health Index, well, nothing like they saw a year ago where they had rapid planting progress this time of year. Much, much drier and much hotter. Now, there is some relief coming. We do see that over the next 15 days here in parts of Rondônia, this is Mato Grosso and Mato Grosso do Sul, and also parts of southern Brazil, definitely picking up on some wetter conditions. Eastern Brazil staying dry, but we've kind of done just a little bit of research into understanding when these folks want to plant. And they're basically looking for a 2-inch rainfall. The problem is with the MJO sticking around in phases 8, 1, and 2, that's fantastic for the Brazilian monsoon. But remember, it's going to keep moving in this direction, this counterclockwise direction, and phases 3, 4, and 5 are a bit drier. Okay? So with that, if they need to get that 2-inch rainfall soon, we can at least take a look at what to expect over the next 10 days. You're looking for this color right in through here. And it's certainly going to be falling in parts of the Amazon, but eastern Brazil, very, very dry. And even over parts of Mato Grosso and Rondônia, very spotty areas picking up better than 1.5 inches to 2 inches of rainfall. So this is not what they want to see in these most productive areas of Brazil. And you can see where those areas are by looking at the map on the right over here. So we need more rainfall than this before they really get the planting going. And again, that magic number seems to be about 2 inches of rainfall from their monsoon. So let's keep a close eye on it throughout this week and next week. To finish up, I just want to take you back over here to Indonesia. We can see that over the weekend, look at all the smoke from the fires here in Indonesia. And that video over there on the right shows as sun was rising here, how the the high frequency light, this would be the short wavelength light, like the blues and the greens are actually filtered out by the smoke, leaving only the long wavelength oranges and reds. It's just amazing to see what that smoke can do to not only the air quality here, but also the light that comes in from the sun. So as we begin fall, again, things are just not very uniform across the planet, even though it's 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness. But with that, we'll wrap it up right here. We Nutrien, thank you for your attention. Have a great week. We look forward to talking to you each day this week, keeping you up to date on what's going on in the weather. Thank you.